Good morning, children. Today we will discuss about the cell wall. So let's start. What is cell wall? In the last class we have already discussed about the different types of solutions related to osmosis, that is hypotonic solution, isotonic solution and hypertonic solution. So today we will be discussing about the cell wall. So what is cell wall? The cell wall is another rigid outer covering in addition to the plasma membrane found in plant cell. The cell wall lies outside the plasma membrane. The cell wall is actually hard rigid covering. As we know, the cell also, the outermost covering of a cell is the plasma membrane. So the cell wall lies outside it, and it is present only for the plant cells. In animal cells it is not present. So as we can see in the picture, the cell wall lies outside the plasma membrane. And for the second point, the plant cell wall is mainly composed of cellulose. The cell wall is actually mainly composed of cellulose. Cellulose, it is a complex substance which provides structural strength to the plant. So due to this presence of this cell wall, that is the cellulose, so the structure of the plants are very strong and rigid as compared to that of the animals. Now, functions of cell wall. So what are the functions of cell wall? Cell wall permits the cells of plant, fungi and bacteria to withstand very dilute hypotonic external media without bursting. So as we have already discussed in the last class, that when we dip a cell in a hypotonic solution, it swells. So when it swells, sometimes it bursts and it exerts some amount of pressure on the plasma membrane, so sometimes it's burst. But due to the presence of the cell wall also exerts an equal amount of pressure on the cell when the cell swells. So therefore the cell does not burst easily. So in such media, that means in hypotonic media, the cells tend to take up water by osmosis. So as we have already discussed in the last class, in hypotonic solution the cell swells due to osmosis. So the cell swells, building up pressure against the cell wall. The cell wall exerts an equal pressure against the swollen cell, as we have already discussed. Because of cell wall, cells can withstand much greater changes in the surrounding than the animal cells. So because of this cell wall, which is very rigid, very hard, and it is composed of cellulose, it gives the structural strength to the plants. So it can also withstand greater changes in the surrounding than the animal cells. So due to these reasons, these trees or plants can survive easily even in the harsh environment where it is not possible for the animals to survive. Now, plasmolysis. When a living plant cell loses water through osmosis, there is a shrinkage or contraction of the contents of the cell away from the cell wall. This phenomenon is known as plasmolysis. So when a living cell loses water through osmosis, that means when we dip a cell, as we have already discussed in the last class, when we dip a cell in a hypotonic solution, it loses water. So in case of the plant cell also, so it loses water. So as it loses water, so there is a shrinkage or contraction of the contents of the cell away from the cell wall. But the cell wall cannot contract or shrink. The shrinkage happens only in the contents of the cell, which is away from the cell wall. So this phenomenon is known as plasmolysis. Once again, I repeat, the shrinkage or the contractions happens only in the contents of the cell wall, not in the contents of the cell, not in the cell wall. So therefore this phenomenon is known as plasmolysis. So next is nucleus. So what is nucleus? It is called the brain of the cell as it controls all the activities of the cell. So the nucleus is also known as the brain of the cell as it controls all the activities of the cell. So what are the compositions of nucleus? The nucleus has a double layered covering called nuclear membrane. The nuclear membrane has pores which allows transfers of materials from inside the nucleus to the cytoplasm, because outside the nucleus there is cytoplasm. So the nuclear membrane has pores which allows the transfers of materials from inside the nucleus to the cytoplasm. The nucleus contains chromosomes which are visible as rod structures only when the cell is about to divide. So these are only visible when the cell is about to divide. So as we can see in the picture of the nucleus, that the nucleus has a double layered covering called a nuclear membrane. The nuclear membrane has pores, which allows, some pores are there as it is visible in the picture. So these pores allow the transfers of material from inside the nucleus to the cytoplasm. So these pores, the transfer of material occurs between the nucleus and the cytoplasm. The nucleus also contains the chromosomes, as we can see in the pictures, which are visible as rod structures, and these are only visible when the cell is about to divide. So let's move to the next subtopic, that is functions of chromosomes. What are the functions of chromosomes? As we have already seen in the pictures about the chromosomes, so what are the functions of chromosomes? Chromosomes contains information for the inheritance of features from the parents to the next generation in form of DNA molecules. So chromosomes, they contain information. They transfer the information from the parent cell to the offsprings in form of DNA. That means when you see a child, how he inherits the characteristics or the traits of his parents, it is due to these chromosomes that got transferred from the parents to the child in form of DNA, in form of DNA molecules. The full form of DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. So the full form of DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. So chromosomes are composed of DNA and protein. So chromosomes are composed of this DNA, that is deoxyribonucleic acid, and protein. DNA molecules contain the information necessary for constructing and organizing the cells, that we have already discussed. So this DNA, it actually contains the information from the parents to the next generation. So therefore this DNA molecules contains the information necessary for constructing and organizing the cells. They will decide about the characteristics or traits of the offspring. So functional segments of DNA are called genes. So genes, so this is, since the gene is not in our syllabus, so therefore you just remember that the functional segments of DNA are called genes. The functional segments of DNA are called genes. In non-dividing cell, the DNA is present as part of chromatin material. In a non-dividing cell, this DNA is present as a part of chromatin material. Chromatin material is visible as entangled mass of thread-like structures. So whenever the cell is about to divide, the chromatin material gets organized into chromosomes and perform the cell division. As you can see in the picture, these chromatin materials are in the form of threads. They are of thread-like structures, as we can see in the pictures. So when the cell is about to divide, so at that time, these thread-like structures, which are the chromatin materials, they get organized into chromosomes and they perform the cell divisions. So this is about the functions of chromosomes. So with that, we remain today's class. So rest of the things we will discuss in the next class. Thank you.